Today we're going to look how to solve equations that have rational numbers in them. So remember, a rational number is just a number that's either a decimal or a fraction. And we already know how to solve equations. And the way to solve equation with rational numbers is using the same rules that we used whenever we solved equation with integers. So let's just do a little warm-up. Let's solve equations that have integers in them. We'll start with x plus 3 equals 10. To solve for x here, we would subtract 3 from both sides, and we would get x equals 7. For this one, 5x equals 30. To solve this, we would divide both sides by 5, or multiply both sides by 1/5, and we would get x equals 6. For this one, we have x minus 5 equals 8. In order to solve this equation, we would have to add 5 to both sides, getting us x equals 13. This is x divided by 3 equals 15. So you need to know that this is the same as saying x over 3 equals 15. So in order to solve this one, we would multiply both sides by 3, and 15 times 3 would give us 45. This is an example of a two-step equation. So remember, when you're solving two-step equations, you want to take care of the addition and subtraction first, and then the multiplication and division. So the first thing we want to undo is the plus 5. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides, and then we'll divide both sides by 4, and we get x equals 4. So let's review the properties of equality. These properties help us solve equations. The first property is called addition, and that says that if you have an equation, a equals b, and you take c, which is any real number, and then that means you can add that c to both sides, as long as you're doing it to both sides. The multiplication property of equality says that if you have an equation that is a equals b, then you can take c, which is a real number, and you can multiply both sides by that number. Alright, so let's do our first example of solving an equation with a rational number. This is x plus 4 over 9 equals 1 over 3. So to solve this, we have to undo the plus 4 over 9. So we'll subtract 4 over 9 from both sides. So now we have x on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, we have 1/3 minus 4/9. So to subtract that, we need to remember that the 4/9 is bigger than the 3/9, so that means we're going to have a negative 1/9. So for this example, we have 5, 6 times x equals 7. So for this problem, to solve for x, we want to divide by 5, 6. So remember that dividing by 5, 6 is the same as multiplying by 6 over 5, because you keep change flip, or you multiply by the reciprocal. So we'll multiply both sides by 6 over 5, and then we get our answers 42 over 5. Here is our next example. X minus 2.45 equals 8.1. So for this one, we'll just add 2.45 to both sides, and then we get the answer x equals 10.55. Our next example is 0.15x equals 52.5. So for this one, you're multiplying 0.15 by x. So to solve for x, to undo that, you're going to divide both sides by 0.15. So 52.5 divided by 0.15 is 350. All right, so there is another way to take care of fractions when we have an equation that has a fraction in it. You can multiply everything by the least common multiple to clear the fraction. This is affectionately known as killing the fraction, because when you multiply by the least common multiple, the denominator denominator turns to 1, which means that you no longer have a denominator to worry about. There's no longer fractions involved. So, for example, here if we have 1/2 x plus 2/3 plus 1/9, the least common multiple of 2, 3, and 9 is 18. So we multiply every single term by 18. So 2 goes into 18 9 times, 3 goes into 18 6 times, and 6 times 2 is 12, and then 9 goes into 18 twice. So we get our new equation, 9x plus 12 equals 2, which is a little bit easier to solve. So let's look at this example. 3y plus 5/8 equals 1 3/4. So we have a mixed number. So the first thing we want to do is change that mixed number into an improper fraction. So 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7, which gives us 7/4. So now we have 3y plus 5/8 equals 7/4. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 5/8 from both sides. So I have 7/4 minus 5/8. So in order to do that, I have to get common denominators. So the 7/4 is going to turn into 14/8. And then 14/8 minus 5/8 gives us 9/8. And then my last step is to divide both sides by 3. So I have 9/8 divided by 3, which is the same as saying 9/8 times 1/3. I'm going to simplify first. So 3 goes into 9 3 times. And then I can multiply. And I get my final answer of 3/8. Let's take a look at this example. I have 2/3 x equals 5/7. So for this problem, I'm going to divide by 2/3. But I remember that dividing by 2/3 is the same as multiplying by 3/2 because dividing by a fraction is multiplying by the reciprocal. So I'm multiplying by 3/2 to both sides. And so when I do that, I get x equals 15/14. Next example, I have 2x minus 1/4 equals 5/6. So I'm going to start with adding 1/4 to both sides. So I have 5/6 plus 1/4. So I need to go ahead and make sure that I get a common denominator when I add 5/6 plus 1/4. And I end up with 13/12. So I have 2x equals 13/12. Last step to solve is I'm going to divide by 2. But I'm going to remember that dividing by 2 is the same as multiplying by 1/2. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 1/2, and I get the answer 13/24. All right, one more example. We have negative 5x plus 6.5 equals 24.75. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to subtract 6.5 from both sides. And once I've done that, I get negative 5x equals 18.25. So my last step is to divide both sides by negative 5. And then 18.25 divided by negative 5 is negative 3.65. All right, that's all for this lesson. Go ahead and try some problems on your own.